I've had several experiences where I've either personally talked to or I've observed some type of conversation with an atheist. I've even seen this in like examples online of conversations between a believer and an atheist. And sometimes the atheist will be asked a question like, "Hey, what would be this? What would it take for you to believe in God? Is there a piece of evidence? Is there a question that if it was answered, therefore then you would believe in God?" And you'll get a variety of answers, but one of the answers that I've heard several times is this idea that, well, if the atheist will say something like, "Well, if God appeared in front of me and I underwent some type of psychological evaluation, so I knew that I wasn't hallucinating, then I could believe that God is real." Now, this is a pretty high standard. This is a requirement that God needs to personally appear in front of someone, but I resonate in some ways with the idea that if they had a personal experience of God, that they would want to test it in some way, that their personal experience alone might not be enough for them, sufficient for them to believe something. Now, I don't know that necessarily that's everyone's standard, but I can understand where somebody's coming from in saying that, hey, if God appeared in front of me, I'd really want to make sure that he was real, so I'd want to test it through some other way. And I actually think that when people make these kinds of statements, it kind of shows the strength. It kind of speaks or suggests the strength of a cumulative case. Now, if you've listened to apologists, you'll hear a lot of Christian apologists talk about a cumulative case. This idea that there's an accumulation of evidences. There's a bunch of different evidences, a bunch of different arguments that all point to God. That if we look at all these different, they might not be directly related to one another, but each of these arguments or pieces of lines of reasoning, pieces of evidence, point to the existence of a God, and that God is the God of the Bible, Jesus. What they'll try to say is that because there's these many pieces of evidence that point to God, therefore we have this strong case. But I think a lot of people struggle with this, even believers. I would say that even Christians struggle with the idea that there's a cumulative case for God, and I think we would prefer, or I think there's something in our heart that would often prefer that single strong piece of evidence, like an experience of God. Like, man, if God could just appear in front of me, or if God could just explain that I've got some question about life, about reality, about the Bible, about whatever, it would be just so great if God could just speak to me, if I could audibly hear his voice, or I could see him, or if this could just be super clear to me. I would love that. But I think that sometimes there's a strength in a cumulative case that is not found in a case where we have a singular strong piece of evidence. I want to try to explain this through. Let's look at some hypothetical situations. Let's imagine that there's a gas station, and the gas station gets robbed one night. And so the police come out, the detectives comes out, and they interview the clerk that got robbed, and the clerk is an amazing witness. The clerk is like, yeah, I remember everything about this person. I remember what they were wearing. I remember the car they got into. And in fact, I know that person personally. That person is so-and-so. He's a past customer of mine. I know their first name, maybe even their last name. I know some things about them. And if I saw him again, I'd for sure recognize him. I mean, this is like a great witness. Okay, so they take the statement, they go out and they go to that person that the suspect that the victim has identified. They go to the suspect and they arrest them. And when they interview them, they say, "No, I didn't rob the place." And when they go to his house, they don't find any of the property that was stolen, the cash or whatever it was, the cigarettes, whatever it was he stole, they can't find. And the clothes that he was wearing, they don't find them at his house. And the car that he has at his house, it doesn't match the car that the clerk says that they saw him get into. In fact, the only thing in this hypothetical case that we're talking about, the only thing that would tie this person to the crime is the witness statement. But hey, the witness statement is great. It's extremely detailed. It identifies him by name. There's all it's a very robust witness statement. But it's the only piece of evidence. Now, if we go to the district attorney, we're going to try, the detective goes to the district attorney and is like, "Hey, this is the case. We've got this, we only have one piece of evidence, but it's great. It's this witness statement." The district attorney has to decide whether they're going to go forward with the case based on this one single piece of evidence. Now, if you look online at like your local district attorney, sometimes you'll see things like they'll have statistics on their website like we win 99.9% of our cases. We're an amazing district attorney. Well, the reason that they can get such high success rates is that a district attorney only prosecutes cases that they really believe that they can win in court. If they think that the case is weak, they're just not going to move forward with it. Just let the guy go. It's not worth it because we don't want to waste our time, our money, and maybe there's some ego or pride or some political feelings in it that say, hey, we don't want to lose. We don't want to spend a lot of time on a case just to lose in court. We only want to prosecute the winners, the cases that we think are slam dunks, that we know that we're going to get a conviction. Well, the district attorney has to decide, based on this case, yeah, we've got this singular piece of evidence, but it's a very strong witness statement, whether they're going to go forward. And there's going to be some, they need to do some type of risk assessment. What's the chances of them winning and the chances of them losing this? Well, with a single piece of evidence, even if it's very specific, it points directly to the suspect, there's the risk that if the defense attorney can introduce doubt about this single piece of evidence in the minds of the jury, you might lose the whole case. So if the district attorney gets up and in cross-examination is talking to the witness, the victim, and can get the victim to say something about their memory that they didn't remember correctly, like the victim said the car was black and actually it was a blue. And so now, well, they were wrong about that part of the story. Could they be wrong about other parts, like who the suspect was? Or maybe there's something in the victim's background, like in the past, maybe they had some type of shady background. Maybe they were convicted of a crime themselves in the past, and now there's something that they can bring up to make the jury doubt that we can trust this witness. Whatever it is, if the defense attorney can introduce doubt about the witness, the whole case stands to be lost. Now let's imagine a similar case. A gas station gets robbed, but it's not a great witness. The victim is like, yeah, I know it was a guy, and he was dressed in like all dark clothing, but that's it. I don't even think I'd recognize him again if I saw him. I just couldn't tell you for sure, even what kind of car he got into. But okay, in this case, we don't have a great witness, but maybe we do have some other pieces of evidence, like we have some surveillance footage from across the street that shows the guy getting into a dark two-door car. Now, we don't know what kind of car it is, we don't know the license plate, but we got the car. And when we test for fingerprints on the counter, we grab a fingerprint that could belong to the suspect, but it could also belong to any of the customers that had been in there that day or another employee. And maybe we have an idea of somebody that we suspected they were robbing, that they were involved in robbery. So we went to their house and we were able to find some dark clothing that sort of matched the clothing that the victim thought that they were wearing, but it's not for sure the same clothing. We don't know. But we checked that person's phone records and we can see that they're, around the time of the crime, they're on their cell phone, and the cell phone is using a cell tower that's right next to the gas station. So we know that they were in the area. And then when we go and look at that person's house, we see that they do drive a dark two-door car. Okay, now you can kind of see where I'm going with this. If we developed a case where we had a number of pieces of evidence that all said that one particular person was consistent with the suspect. Let's imagine, I gave you a couple examples. Let's imagine we got 10 pieces of evidence that all say, yeah, this suspect matches this person matches the suspect in the crime, but we don't have a single piece that says for sure it's him. We don't have the witness saying it's absolutely that guy. Instead, we have a bunch of pieces that suggest that this one person was involved in the crime. Are you following me? The strength of this case is that we have many pieces of evidence, but the weakness is we don't have that one surefire hit like we would have if we had a great, a witness that could identify him. However, there is a strength in this type of case. If we're going to bring it, in the end, the detective has to bring the case to the district attorney to see, what are you going to do with this case? Are you going to move forward or not? But there is a certain strength in this because there's so many pieces of evidence, and because they're all separate. If the defense attorney is able to make the jury doubt one or two pieces of evidence, if we've got 10 pieces of evidence that all point to the same guy, even if those two are in doubt, the other 8 conform still a cumulative case on their own, suggesting that this is the one person. And so you don't have the risk. You don't have the strength that you would have in the first case, where you have the eyewitness pointing directly, a single piece of evidence that points directly to who did it. But you don't have the risk associated with what if we doubt that one piece of evidence, because there's so many pieces of evidence that even if there's doubt or question about one or two, or even three, we might still have enough evidence to convict in court. Now, in Christianity, I actually think that we have pieces of evidence that are equivalent to the strength of the eyewitness statement that we have in our first hypothetical. But this is when we talk about a cumulative case. The reason we're trying to get to a cumulative case is because a cumulative case it ends up being a stronger case, even if we don't have those ideal pieces of evidence. Even though maybe we don't have, wouldn't I love in my investigation of Christianity, wouldn't I love for one of the pieces of evidence to be that one day God actually appeared in front of me and spoke to me? Absolutely, I would love that. That would be a great piece of evidence. But because we have a cumulative case, we might not need such a strong, direct piece of evidence if we have many other pieces of evidence that we might consider weaker or more moderate levels of evidence for who God is. Because we have so many, we may end up having an extremely strong case where we don't need that personal experience, or we don't need that eyewitness, that single piece of evidence that points to God. This is the strength of a cumulative case, and we don't run the risk, if our faith is based on a single piece of very strong evidence, like our personal experience, if we ever start to doubt our personal experience, like, hey, was that really God speaking to me, or was that just my own feeling? That can cause doubt for our whole faith system. But if we have many pieces of evidence that all point to the same thing, then even as we doubt one or two pieces of the evidence, I'm not really sure where I stand with certain things, our strength can still stand firm. We can still have confidence, maybe even more confidence in a cumulative case than we would if we had that one piece of dream evidence.